There comes a moment in every conscious life when the individual must turn inward, not as an escape, but as a return to the place of original sovereignty. The psyche, often afflicted by the noise of the world, longs for silence, a silence found not in the absence of sound, but in the fullness of presence. It is not by altering the world that we gain peace, but by transforming the relation we hold with it. One must build an inner fortress, not made of stone or pride, but of understanding and insight. This fortress is not a retreat from life, but a sanctuary within it. In the depths of the unconscious, we encounter forces not bound to the whims of others, but only to the truths of our own becoming. Affliction from others arises when our psyche is porous, when we allow the projections of others to shape our being. Yet, if we would only stand within ourselves fully, we would see that no judgment can reach us unless we consent to it. The modern man, so deeply conditioned by collective opinion, has forgotten the sacred act of inner listening. He reacts rather than reflects, and in so doing, becomes the puppet of externalities. To make no one afflict you, you must cease being a mere reaction to the world. You must reclaim your own image from the hands of the crowd. What they think of you is none of your business. It is merely their unconscious speaking, not yours. Thus, in building this inner fortress, we establish the sovereign kingdom of the self. The afflictions that once pierced us now find no purchase. Like arrows against a stone wall, they fall powerless. This is not detachment born of arrogance, but of inner strength. One does not need to escape humanity. One must simply refuse to let its shadow become our own. Man is not troubled by what he sees, but by what he projects upon it. Every affliction born from another is a mirror held up to the unresolved content within the self. The harsh word, the jealous glance, the manipulational, these are projections, not realities, and when one learns to see them as such, their sting dissolves like mist before the morning sun. We are afflicted because we are unconscious of our own inner material. The world, then, becomes the screen upon which our unconscious plays out its unresolved dramas. If someone offends you, ask yourself not what they have done, but what within you is responding with such pain. It is not repression, I advise, but illumination. Bring it to light, and you shall no longer be its victim. There is no torment more subtle than the expectation that others treat us as we desire. Yet, every time we look outward for validation, we give away the keys to our inner kingdom. To live unafflicted is to cease bargaining with the world for our worth. The self must become its own judge, jury, and witness. Only then can it walk among the crowd untouched. The liberation of self is not found in isolation from others, but in recognition of the limits of their power over you. As long as you believe others can determine your peace, they will. But once you see that their projections are their burdens to carry, not yours, you are free. You become, at last, the master of your own inner weather. There is a secret known only to those who have suffered consciously. Pain, when embraced with awareness, becomes power. The archetype of the wounded healer teaches us that no affliction is without its medicine. Every wound opens the soul not to weakness, but to depth, and when one descends into suffering willingly, one emerges with gifts. Too often, people seek to avoid the afflictions of others by hiding, retreating, or building walls of bitterness. But these are illusions. The only true immunity lies in transformation. What once wounded you can become your strength, if you do not resist it. Let the affliction pierce, you then hold it in your awareness. There, it changes shape. The ego resists pain, but the soul sees it as a doorway. When someone causes you suffering, ask not how to escape, but what this pain reveals about the unseen part of your being. Perhaps it is your need for control. Perhaps it is your forgotten self-worth. The outer affliction becomes the teacher of inner truth. The one who has suffered and survived with consciousness becomes a healer, not just of others, but of himself. He no longer fears what people say or do. He knows, if it wounds, it will also awaken. If it burns, it will also cleanse. And thus, he walks in peace not because the world is kind, but because he is no longer vulnerable to its cruelty. Every time you are afflicted by another's behavior, there is a shadow at work, not theirs, yours. The shadow is the part of ourselves we have rejected, forgotten, or condemned. And until we make peace with it, the world will show it to us again and again. This is not punishment, it is a call to integration. To be free from the affliction of others, one must first reconcile with the darkness within. When someone provokes anger or shame in you, ask, what part of me is speaking? Is it the conscious self, or is it the shadow, seeking expression through emotion? What we reject internally, we react to externally. Therefore, the judgment we feel is often not from others, but from our own inner critic, wearing the mask of the outer world. The act of integrating the shadow is not an invitation to chaos, but to wholeness. You are not becoming worse, you are becoming real. You cannot be offended by what you have already owned. If you have embraced your imperfections, no one can use them against you. They cease to be weapons and become features of your authenticity. Thus, judgment no longer afflicts you because you have nothing left to hide. You do not fear being exposed because you have already exposed yourself to yourself. This is the great paradox. The one who owns his shadow walks in the light, and nothing, and no one can disturb his peace, for he is no longer at war within. The process of individuation is the journey from the false self to the true one, from the persona we wear for the world to the authentic being we are in solitude. When you walk this path, you no longer need the world to agree with you, affirm you, or understand you. Your sense of reality comes from within, and when reality is rooted internally, external chaos loses its grip. Most affliction arises from the gap between the self and the mask we wear. The more dependent we are on maintaining that mask, the more vulnerable we are to others who threaten it. But when you begin to individuate, when you choose your own values, your own thoughts, your own path, and others lose the power to disturb you. They cannot touch what they do not understand. Individuation is not the denial of relationship, it is the sanctification of inner truth. You will still walk among others, but not as a beggar seeking validation, instead, as a sovereign offering presence. You will still feel emotion, but it will not dominate you. And the afflictions that once brought you low will now pass through you, like wind through open hands. To individuate is to know who you are, independent of what others believe. It is to root your being not in applause or rejection, but in truth. This is why no one can afflict the individuated soul, because that soul no longer lives at the mercy of appearance. It has become real, and what is real cannot be harmed by illusion. At the heart of every affliction lies a frustrated ego. It desires control over how others treat us, how the world sees us, how events unfold, and when that control is denied, the ego suffers. But the soul does not need control. The soul seeks meaning, not mastery. And when we live from the soul, the need to control fades, and so does the pain that comes with it. Many people are wounded not by what happens to them, but by their belief that it shouldn't have happened. This is the ego speaking, declaring its superiority over reality. But the world was not made to satisfy our plans. It unfolds according to deeper patterns, archetypal flows that the ego cannot command. To find peace, we must surrender not as defeat, but as alignment. Surrender is not passivity. It is the active choice to release the illusion of control and participate consciously in the dance of life. You are not the puppet master, you are the witness and the participant. The ego believes it must protect us through domination, But true protection comes from trust in the self, in life, in the unfolding of the psyche's path. When you cease trying to control others, they can no longer afflict you. Their actions no longer define your worth. Their choices no longer endanger your peace. You stand like a tree, rooted not in their approval, but in your own inner soil. And in that stillness, you discover a strength far greater than control, the strength of surrender. There is a sacred art in withdrawal, not the withdrawal of bitterness or defeat, but of self-respect and discernment. When others wound you, you are not required to remain exposed. You may step back, not as a coward, but as one who understands the value of inner space. To withdraw is to reclaim the soul from the noise of the world. In silence, you hear yourself again. In solitude, you return to wholeness. It is in these moments, away from reaction and performance, that the deeper truths emerge. We are not meant to be constantly entangled in the affairs of others. Sometimes, the most powerful act is not confrontation, but quiet departure. To withdraw is not to abandon love, but to refine it. You learn to offer your presence where it is valued, not demanded. You learn to shield your heart, not with walls, but with wisdom. When you no longer need to explain or defend yourself, you are free. Your silence becomes your sanctuary, and your presence becomes sacred again. And when you return, you do so not from need, but from fullness. You are not seeking resolution from others, because you have already found it within. Their words, their actions, their judgments, they may still come, but they will find no foothold, for you have withdrawn into the place where nothing and no one can afflict you anymore. To suffer less is not to feel less, but to relate differently to what is felt. The secret lies in becoming the witness, the inner observer who sees without being consumed. When others insult you, observe the impulse to defend. When the world agitates, observe the stirring within. Do not suppress, simply observe. In observation, transformation begins. You are not your thoughts. You are not even your feelings. You are the awareness that contains them. And when you shift into that awareness, affliction loses its teeth. The insult no longer defines you, simply arises and fades. The loss no longer crushes you, moves through, and you remain. The witness is untouched, even as it sees everything. This witnessing is not detachment in the cold sense, but in the sacred sense. It is the ability to remain rooted in the self, while the waves of life rise and fall. The drama continues, but you are not its actor, you are its seer. You learn not to absorb the poison of others, but to let it pass through, leaving you whole. In this space of awareness, nothing can truly harm you, because you no longer resist life. You allow it, and what you allow, you transcend. You do not become numb, you become luminous. The witness is the inner light that reveals all and is wounded by none. To become the witness is to dwell in the realm of the eternal, where affliction has no name. Man can endure almost any suffering, so long as he finds meaning within it. It is the senseless, the empty, the chaotic wound that breaks him. But once suffering is clothed in purpose, it becomes bearable, even sacred. Therefore, when you are afflicted by the world, ask not merely why this pain, but what is its meaning for my becoming. Meaning is not given to us. It is discovered in the alchemical fire of inner work. Each affliction is a cipher, a message from the unconscious, inviting you to greater self-awareness. Perhaps the betrayal you suffer is meant to awaken your boundaries. Perhaps the rejection is your soul demanding solitude. No suffering is accidental when viewed through the lens of the soul. The ego seeks comfort, the soul seeks expansion, and it is often in the discomfort, the disillusionment, that the soul stretches beyond its previous limits. To make no one afflict you, you must become a student of your own suffering. See in each wound a teacher, in each loss a symbol, and in each tear, a new initiation into depth. When meaning is found, affliction no longer defeats you, shapes you. It becomes part of your myth, your story, your individuation, and so the things that once tormented you now become your foundation. They do not disappear, but they are transmuted. Like lead into gold, pain becomes purpose, and in purpose, you become untouchable. If you wish to be free of affliction, you must let something die. Not the world, not the people around you, but the false self that clings to their opinion. This self, born of fear and shaped by social expectation, is the one who suffers most. It is a mask that demands to be liked, to be accepted, to be seen as good, but this mask is fragile. It breaks at every harsh word. The false self lives in the court of public opinion. It thrives on applause and withers in criticism. As long as you serve it, you will remain a slave to the moods of others. But when it dies, when you let go of the need to be someone in the eyes of others, you are reborn. This is not annihilation, it is resurrection. The true self does not seek approval, it seeks truth, and in truth it finds liberation. You must allow the old self to crumble, the one who was so easily bruised by others' judgments. Let it fall away like old skin. What remains will not be a lesser self, but a deeper one that cannot be afflicted, because it no longer relies on the outer world for its identity. This death is not easy. It feels like loss, but it is, in fact, a return to what you were before the world told you who to be. When that return is complete, the opinions of others become like passing clouds. They may darken the sky, but they no longer define your weather. You become, finally, yourself, and that self cannot be shaken. There is a temptation in suffering to cast our wounds onto others, to make them responsible for our peace, but this is the path of perpetual affliction. For if another can disturb your peace, then your peace is borrowed, and what is borrowed can be taken. True freedom comes only when we accept full responsibility for our inner life. This does not mean others are innocent of wrongdoing, but it does mean they are not the authors of your soul. You alone decide what takes root in your psyche. You alone determine what beliefs, what voices, what stories live within you. This is not a burden, it is a sacred task, the task of becoming whole. Responsibility is not guilt. It is the recognition that while you may not control what others do, you do control how you carry it. You may choose to carry it as a grievance, or you may choose to transmute it into insight. One leads to bitterness, the other to wisdom. In this choice, you reclaim your power. When you no longer wait for others to change, or apologize, or understand, you are free. You stop asking the world to be different, and you start becoming different. You walk the narrow path of self-mastery, and on that path, no one can afflict you. For you have become responsible, not for their actions, but for your own becoming. And now, at the journey's end, we arrive not at perfection, but at union. The union of all within you, the light and shadow, the wound and the wisdom, the fear and the courage. Peace is not found in banishing parts of yourself, but in bringing them together. It is the soul, whole and undivided, that nothing and no one can afflict. Most suffering arises from division within. One part of us wants to forgive, another wants to punish. One part wants solitude, another fears abandonment. The path to immunity is not in choosing sides, but in listening to all voices and bringing them into dialogue. Integration is the soul's peace treaty. When you are united within, the world cannot divide you. People may still misunderstand, may still hurt, may still disappoint, but they do not split you. Their voices may echo, but they do not control. You are no longer scattered across the judgments of others. You have come home to yourself. This is what it means to live untouched. Not that life is gentle, but that you are whole, and wholeness is the shield, the sanctuary, the stillness within the storm. So walk onward, not in search of safety, but of inner unity. For when you are one within, then nothing and no one can afflict you anymore. Solitude, though feared by many, is the furnace in which transformation occurs. It is there, in the silence between distractions, that the self reveals itself. Not the self crafted for others, but the one formed in the quiet conversation between the conscious and the unconscious. To be alone without loneliness is a mark of true inner maturity. And in that state, affliction loses all urgency. In solitude, we meet our truest companion, our own soul. We learn to speak with it, not through noise or intellect, but through presence. The external world becomes quieter, and the inner world begins to speak. And what it says is not always comforting, but it is always true. And from truth comes peace. The kind of peace that cannot be disturbed by the misunderstandings of others. You begin to notice, as solitude deepens, that many afflictions were distractions, waves at the surface of a sea whose depths had gone unexplored. In the stillness of being alone, you are not abandoned, you are returned to yourself. The soul was never in others' hands. It has always waited for you, patiently, beneath the noise. Solitude is the philosopher's mirror, the mystic's lamp, the healer's silence. It is not a rejection of the world, but a coming home. Once you have known its light, you walk through life differently. You need less, you fear less, you react less, for you have met the only one who can truly afflict you, free you, yourself. We live our lives through stories told by our parents, our culture, and eventually by ourselves. And yet, the greatest affliction lies not in what others do, but in the unconscious myth we believe about who we are. If you see yourself as victim, the world will always seem cruel. If you see yourself as rejected, you will find rejection in every glance. But if you awaken to your own myth, you may rewrite it. The myth you choose to live determines the affliction you experience. It is not the event that wounds it, is the meaning we assign to it. Thus, to be free, you must examine the myth you live by. Who do you believe you are? Whose voice have you internalized? Who cast you in this Roland? Why have you remained in it? To change your life, you must become the author of your inner narrative, not in fantasy, but in conscious authorship. What kind of character will you be in your own unfolding story? The hero who transforms suffering, the wise one who integrates shadow, the healer who no longer needs to be healed to offer peace. When you live from a conscious myth, you are no longer enslaved by the unconscious projections of others. Their narrative ceases to define you. You may listen, but you do not obey. For you are living a deeper truth, one written not in reaction, but in revelation. And from that myth, your life becomes an offering, not a defense. In the end, all transformation is a return, not to who we were told to be, but to who we have always been beneath the conditioning. This sacred center, this nucleus of the psyche, does not shout or demand. It whispers, waits, and watches. And when we finally turn toward it, all affliction begins to fall away, not because it no longer exists, but because we are no longer identified with what suffers. To live from the center is to live from the soul. It is to be rooted in being, not appearance, in essence, not ego. The sacred center does not need to be defended, only remembered. And in that remembering, we become who we are, not for the sake of anyone else, but for the sake of wholeness itself. This is where peace lives, not on the edges of approval, but at the center of selfhood. When you are centered, you may still feel the winds of conflict, the voices of discontent, but they do not move you. You observe. You respond. You remain. You are not above life. You are within it, but no longer consumed by it. So return to your center again and again, in the morning stillness, in the moment of pause before speech, in the breath between reactions. There it is, your sacred ground. And once you are anchored there, nothing and no one can afflict you anymore, for you are no longer lost in the world. You have come home to your soul.